Hi there, and welcome to the Multiply You podcast, where we showcase top experts in their space and reveal all the secrets you need to know to multiply you.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Austin Clark here, host of the Multiply You podcast. Hope everyone's creating a great day so far. We've got another fantastic guest that I'll introduce here in just a moment, and a really fascinating company too. And so I'm excited to be able to learn more about the foundation of this company, and also to be able to really contribute to each one of you as you're building out your systems and your processes. And Gary's going to be just great with us. He's from Whale, which was founded just a couple of short years ago. This episode, it's brought to you by Moxie Pest Control. We're growing like crazy. We've been so fortunate to be deemed an essential service or an essential business, and to be able to continue to operate. This has also caused us to experience just a hyper type growth. We grow all the same ways that you do. One of the ways that we've grown in the last 24 months that's been new or different for us is via acquisition. And so specifically in Arizona, I've also got some good news about different markets that we'll be able to either enter into or kind of include those acquisition services for. And we'll drop those in a couple more podcasts. But for now, if anyone knows anybody in Arizona that owns a pest control company, 3, 4, 5 plus more vehicles on the road, that's looking to be able to transition into the next chapter of their life, send them our way. We'd love to be able to learn about that and help them to be able to do that. If they give us the opportunity, they can reach out to me directly on my cell, call or text at 480-254-9730. They can also email me directly at aclark@moxiepestcontrol.com. We'd love to be able to learn about those opportunities. Now, Gary is the co-founder of Whale, and it was founded in 2018, so a relatively new company. He serves as its CEO. Prior to Whale, Gary founded a company specializing in providing and managing IT services, an industry that requires extensive process documentation and effective implementation of those procedures. With this domain expertise and experience, he decided to co-found Whale, and aspires to enable businesses around the world to scale business operations by connecting their teams to the right process, policy, and procedure in the moment of need. Gary, thank you so much for being on. How are you doing today?
I am doing well. Thank you for having me, Austin.
Of course. Let's kind of jump right on into this. I like to start a lot of these mostly by just hearing about a little of people's background, where they've been, where they are, maybe where they're going, as we kind of got to know each other a couple of minutes before the show. I already know that we share a lot of the same passions as it relates to documentation, systems, processes, and a standardized way of doing things. And we'll certainly get more into that. But tell us a little bit about you. Tell us a little bit about your path.
Sure. So I would say my path as an entrepreneur started 9 years ago. So I finished university, didn't know what to do with my degree. So I got into sales because I wanted to put myself out there, meet new people, and get more comfortable, broadening my network. And so I went from one job to another. And at a certain point, one of my friends said, "Hey, Gary, I want to start my own business. What do you think?" And so I was actually in a great spot at a great company at that point. So I took about 6 months of weighing the pros and cons of getting into my own business, because growing up, it was never something I was aspiring to do. It was never something like, hey, I want to have my own business. And so after 6 months, I decided to go for it. I was 24 probably at that time. And never regretted it for a second. And I can tell you, for never having that aspiration of being an entrepreneur, once you've been it, you'd never want to do anything else anymore. And so I got the taste for it, and I grew the company with my friend for the past 8 years. Last year, I decided to move away and do something else, which became Whale. But had the opportunity to grow a company from 2 people to, I think it's 35 already employees, very organically. It was such an experience. But one of the challenges I faced growing that company is what inspired us to start that new company, Whale, which is exactly what you mentioned in the beginning, is making sure that you can streamline your operations with the right documents, with your standard operating procedures and policies. And we just struggled so much with getting that right, because in an IT company, it is important to have your processes streamlined and having everyone follow them and be aware of them, and just storing them in what most companies do, storing them in Google Drive or writing them in Word documents and putting on your file server. That just doesn't work. I kind of joke that when you do that, you turn them into a graveyard of documents, because that happens a lot. You have these great documents and nobody looking at them. And so we thought that
I'm smiling so much. I'm smiling so much, Gary, because I feel like you have access to my Google Drive and you've seen this graveyard of, they're really great documents, but no one knows where to find them. No, I mean, it's so much good information. It's kind of like the internet, not quite as big. And it's just there. The other thing that you said is, as far as like that entrepreneurial bug, if you ever went to be an employee somewhere else, you'd probably, like me, be the worst employee in the world, because now you've kind of done it and tasted it, and there's certainly ups and downs to all of that. I kind of want to get like right into the meat of some of this, and so I mean, what was how was Whale? How did it come about, or how was it inspired? A little bit of what you've said almost has me thinking that it came from a place of either pain or not bashing your head against a wall, but just like, oh my goodness, there's just such, how do we align all of these employees, all of these clients, all of these, if we have 35 employees, there's 35 different ways of doing everything, even as simple as cleaning the bathroom, and you're not even into SOPs or documentation yet. And so how was the company founded, or like where did that inspiration for you come from?
Yeah, so I would definitely say it came from my personal pain, being the integrator. So we ran on a framework called EOS, which is a very popular framework in the United States. Which kind of, if you're the managing director, you call it the integrator. It's the person that kind of oversees all of the processes and makes sure the business is streamlined. So the idea of Whale came from the initial pain that I felt like all I did with my time was putting out fires, because people were not sure on how to handle specific situations. And so all I did was jump into operational stuff. And I just felt like my value was more in the strategic part of the business, but I was just running out of time. And so naturally, the first thought was, okay, perfect. I'm going to document how to do things, and I'm going to share that with the team, and the team is going to pick up on it, and I'm going to save a lot of time and be able to work on the business instead of in the business. And so I went the Google Drive and SharePoint and file server way, and that failed horribly. And so I started talking to, I was in a peer network group at the time with about 200 other companies in our industry. And I started talking about this challenge. And the more I talked about this, the more everyone was like, yeah, we have the exact same problem. This is the Google Drive solution is not working. So I felt like, okay, there is something there. There is a problem to be solved. And so I partnered up with another friend. And by the way, I am a big advocate of doing business with friends. A lot of people in the beginning kind of said, don't go that way. There's so many pitfalls. I can tell from experience, I've only seen the benefits from it. If you have a good balance and a good relationship, it's only there's only value there. But so I started with another friend, and the way we approached this was, we looked at the problem at hand. It was not documenting. People can document. It was making sure that people find them and use them. It's the execution part of the process documents that's the problem. And we drilled it back to the source that, it may sound funny, but people are lazy. People will take the shortest route towards whatever they need to do. And so I saw that the shortest route was not going to Google Drive and finding a document. The shortest route was winging it and just doing whatever I thought was right, asking colleagues the same questions over and over again. So they were not only losing time, but also losing time of their experts. Um,
Google
or
probably.
yeah, exactly. Or it was like, hey, we have all these awesome tools these days with Microsoft Teams and Slack communication tools, and they would just spam their questions there. That was the shortest route. Um, and so when we developed Whale, we needed for this solution to work to create a newer, fastest route to information. And that's kind of the inspiration of Whale and our specific approach towards employee onboarding, training, and guidance based on the processes you develop in our software tool.
And so, Gary, maybe tell us about, I'll kind of throw this at you now and you can sort of think of it, but I would love to be able to learn and have like listeners learn about like a case study, and maybe not one that's like a total home run out of the park. They were wasting 500 hours a week and losing $10,000 a day, and now they're making $1 billion. I'm sure that those case studies exist, but maybe just a more kind of middle of the pack kind of case study. And before we get into that, I mean, so what? What are some of the common things? You can do this with your eyes closed and in your sleep now because of all of the clients that you have and how the company is growing and scaling so quickly. But so people are inherently lazy, if you will. But before you even do a consult or your people do a consultation with the company, what do you know and what do your people know already is the matter? It sounds like maybe they have some of their things in Google Drive, which I guess is a good start. But I mean, what are the 2 or 3 things that you just know you can walk in immediately in the first hour and say, hey, you might want to consider these things, or if you made these adjustments, you would see the needle move a lot. What are some of those things?
Yeah. So um, the the biggest indicators probably that we see are when a company is scaling, and like you mentioned in the beginning, you're in hyper growth mode, but even in slow growth mode, and you hire new employees, that's when you really feel that pain of if only we had a better way of onboarding and training our new hire on how we want things done, on how to do role specific tasks. That's where the biggest pain comes from, because it takes so much time to ramp up a new hire that's where a lot of flags go up from, oh, the things we're doing now is just not great. Next to that, probably a customer experience that is not consistent. They get complaints because a specific staff member is doing it differently than how they want it done. And so they get complaints, or mistakes are being made, and that costs money, not only time, but also money. And so these are probably the 2 major red flags that when we come in, they probably are very aware of. Yeah, that's exactly what's happening. That and the Google Drive being a graveyard always resonates immediately with everyone. So I would say that those are probably the biggest challenges that we're trying to solve, creating more scalability when it comes to onboarding training, but also just more consistency in how your business operates in their different departments. And so SOPs, process document training manuals, call it what they want, are a great way to solve these issues, but we need to make sure that people use them. And that's where the whale story begins, I would say.
So, thing number one, onboarding. Companies or firms definitely feel it as they're adding team members, either one at a time or a dozen at a time, or however that looks. And then also, I really appreciate number two, what you said about a consistent experience. There's a couple of different instances. I think that Michael E. Gerber shares one in his book, The E Myth, as it relates to him getting a haircut. and how he went to do that. And, you know, the first time they did it one way and they, you know, give him a good blow dry when he was done. The second time they didn't. He was offered coffee at one instance and then not. And because that experience was so different, it was just that. It was a different experience every time that didn't have the consumer Michael at that time having confidence in what the next service would be like,
Mhm.
or the next good or product would be like, or the next one. And, you know, whether consumers know it or not, they need that consistent experience. I mean, just imagine, for example, right? If you went onto Amazon and the way that you purchased or searched was different just by a little bit every single time,
Yeah.
that would cause a lot of friction, a lot of confusion. What about a case study? Is there one that comes to mind that you could share of a client in the last year or two that used the Whale platform, engaged with the company, and
Yeah.
things improved, or whatever else?
I have a one specifically in mind because you started off the discussion with mentioning that you are in acquisition mode, and so definitely a good use case for having your processes streamlined is when you start doing acquisitions. And so we have a number of companies that are growing through acquisitions, and so um, when you think about the pain of onboarding one new hire, think about the pain of onboarding an entire new company in your way of work. And so I would say that's a very interesting use case in which some of our customers have looked at Whale in a way to make those acquisitions, um, just make them more fluid, make sure that as they onboard all of these new colleagues coming from a different entity, that not only they understand, hey, this is how we're doing things, this is how we're going to improve, but also, hey, welcome, this is who we are, this is our culture, because we are a big advocate of not just documenting processes and policies, but also document who you are, what your entity is, what your culture is about, what makes your company so special. So when someone new is hired, or when you're integrating a lot of new members into your company, they know where they're ending up in. And so um, I would say that having a system in place when you grow, and being either through acquisition or by just hiring a lot of new people, is gonna make things so much easier. And it's even the fact when you're on the selling side of things, it makes it more interesting as well. I've seen companies that have documented their processes sell for a whole lot more than a business that had nothing documented. And it makes sense, right? Because if you're acquiring a company, you're not only buying the revenue, you're also buying the processes, how the company runs. And if you have a very clear view on how it works, and if you see like, wow, this is great, this is a well-oiled machine, you're going to want to pay more because you know this is going to work well once we've acquired it. So there's so many sides of it that I would say this is maybe even for what you're going through, probably one of the most valuable assets and resource you could put into.
Well, and I love too that, Gary, you bring up, valuation. It's probably been close to a year ago, maybe about 9 months, but I had a conversation with a gentleman at a private equity firm, and I maybe a couple of times a month, I'll either get a call or an email or something in the mail like you do about, sell us your company. And for whatever reason, I called this particular firm and let them know up front, hey, we're not looking to exit or sell right now, but I would be interested in learning about the way that your firm approaches valuation for home service companies or SaaS companies or whatever else. And I was really appreciative. He took about 45 minutes to be able to share just some of the metrics that they look at as it relates to cost of goods sold, and obviously profit margin, having either reoccurring revenue or a subscription based type revenue. And he listed and rattled off about a dozen things. And he said, and Austin, by the way, all of these things that would make your company or any company more valuable to an investor or a private equity firm or whatever, they are the exact same things that will make you more money now or make your company more valuable or more profitable now. And so he said, whether you sell your company or not, or however that works or looks, you should do these things now because it will make it more valuable. The second piece of that, I was on the other day with Ken Goodrich of Gettle. He owns a very large and well-branded HVAC company here in Phoenix, and then about 7 or 8 other markets. And one of the things that he shared that I thought was important is that, smaller companies, a lot of the times they're succeeding because they have a very, very dynamic president or CEO. And that is problematic for investors or private equity firms, because if that person goes and the whole thing crumbles, that's not good. And so one of the things that he was kind of driving home was, look, whether it's at this company, another company, wherever, you want to be able to have, as you've said, Gary, things documented and things functioning without some dynamic person having to be there all the time to hold it together. That's not a company. That's like torture and prison. And if you're an entrepreneur at one point, you've been there throughout your path. And so anyway, more working on the business rather than in the business, and spending your time as wisely as possible. Let's Gary talk briefly about knowledge gaps and how the Whale platform works in being able to bridge that gap amongst team members. And so I'm very familiar with Slack. I'm very familiar with Pronto, Teams, right? Microsoft Teams, and we're on Zoom right now. And so we've got all of these ways to be able to communicate, yet most firms are bad at it, or there's a lot of area for improvement. But how does the Whale platform bridge that gap between knowledge gaps and its employees? So, and I really like that you said they were, coworkers or colleagues or employees were just spamming their questions out through, whether it's leaning over in the cubicle, if they're in a physical space, and saying, hey, Gary, I forgot, or I don't know this. I'm laughing because I can just see in my mind the number of times that's happened literally right outside these doors. But how does Whale bridge that gap and allow the sharing of your knowledge base so that people that are perhaps inherently lazy can find the information that they need as quickly as possible?
Yeah, and it ties back to what you said earlier. It's making yourself replaceable as the owner is probably the greatest thing that you can do. And obviously documenting is the way to go. And as you're growing your business, you're going to go and delegate more and more stuff, and remove all of that stuff in your head, and writing it out is the right action. And so the way Whale works and helps in that fashion is, well, first of all, it's a tool that allows you to capture and document in one central place. It's going to give you a variety of tools, and so will not limit you to just adding text on a page, but will give you abilities like doing screen recordings, adding video, adding images, GIFs, all of that stuff that makes it dynamic, because documentation doesn't necessarily needs to be boring. I'll admit it's probably not the thing that gets you most excited when you jump out of bed. You're probably not like, yay, documentation today. But we can make it easier for you, and you can make it engaging and fun for the people that actually need to go through it. So that's one area. The most important area is how am I going to connect that to make sure that I fill those knowledge gaps, that I train and support my members when and where they need it. And so we call it just in time, because a big challenge, and what I see a lot of companies do and kind of fail in, is they create this onboarding phase in which a new hire is being thrown with so much information in a short period of time, and then they're like, okay, you've got everything, go ahead, start doing your job, and they start making mistakes, and they need to ask questions, and people are like, but we just went through all of this onboarding stuff. Well, that doesn't work because people forget. It's too much information. They cannot process it. So you need to deliver it when and where it makes sense. And so one of the ways in which we help companies do that is through our web extension. And so our web extension is a piece of technology that embeds what you've created in Whale and delivers it in the workflows of your staff. So imagine that you have a CRM where your sales reps are working in. Instead of having them go and find how to do specific things in their CRM or how to handle objections from things coming in through emails, the Whale is actually going to pick up on, hey, I see you're working in the CRM. I see you're trying to move a deal from phase 2 to phase 3. Here's the right thing that you can do right now. And it's going to actually show up in the CRM. It's going to be embedded in there so they can have quick access to it. It's one click. So it is the shortest route. It's going to be quicker than asking a colleague, but it's going to be right there where they are working in their workflow. And that's what makes all of the difference. It's between having it right in front of you while you're working on it, being relevant to what you're doing at that specific time and place, because it's going to embed in whatever tool you might use as long as it's web-based, because it is a web extension. But that's how we contextualize and deliver that documentation that you've created to your staff member when and where they need it. And so that has been one of our main differentiators, because there are a lot of other tools out there, but we feel like they create just another silo where information sits. And you don't want information to sit. You want it to be alive. You want it to be embedded and connected to the places where people need to work. And so, see that as we're working more and more online and we're on these calls and we're in our tools and we're adopting a lot of new technology, we felt like being there where the work happens makes more sense. At the same time, if you have offline processes and you have a warehouse where you want people to be aware, hey, there's specific procedures to how we organize specific matters. For example, again, instead of having like a physical binder sit there and catch dust, we went the smarter way. You can create QR codes based on what you've documented in Whale and have people just pick up their smartphone, scan the QR code, and get the right procedure delivered to them. And so updating and maintaining all of this doesn't mean printing out every time you make a change, printing out that new binder and putting it there. It's going to be automatic. So leveraging technology to improve how your staff members work, helping them, guiding them, supporting them is what Whale is all about, I would say.
And so, Gary, does Whale integrate with nearly any CRM out there as long as it's got like an open API? Have you come across a platform yet that Whale doesn't integrate with, or?
So because it's a web extension that you can just grab from the Chrome store, it will integrate with any tool as long as it's web-based. And most tools today are cloud-based, they are web-based. So Salesforce, HubSpot, Asana, Xero, QuickBooks, whatever tool you may use, it's going to embed right in there. And there's no custom development. We don't need to plug APIs together. It's out of the box. It's a one-click install. It's just going to embed inside your tool, and it's going to contextualize what you're doing to the documents you've created.
And so you talked a little bit also about competitive advantage. And so, I mean, what could the average user or client of Whales expect in terms of either time saved or, what is Whales' competitive advantage or your guys' value proposition? Hey, if you have I don't know. So I'm in the home service space. I own a pest control company. And let's say it's, just to make the numbers round, $1 million company, and we have 10 staff or 20 staff. We're obviously never looking to be able to reduce staff. We want to add staff because that means that there's more work to do or work that needs to be done. But would you, those that employ Whale, would they be able to either reduce staff by 10% and then reallocate those resources to doing other things inside of the business? Does it save the average employee 30 minutes a day or 5 hours a day, or maybe speak to some of those points?
Yeah, there's definitely tangible and more untangible benefits of having a system in place like Whale. I would say there's probably the biggest ones are time savers. People, I think don't know how much time they lose on a daily basis looking back at, wait a minute, how does this work? Let's ask a colleague, let's look in Slack or in Microsoft Teams. And on average, I would say people probably lose around an hour a day, and multiply that by the number of employees you have. That's a lot of time lost just looking on how to do things. Um, for new hires, I've heard from many of our customers that they've created this experience for newcomers that um, just makes them feel like, hey, I feel that they're investing in me, that there is something in place to get me up to speed in which it's going to support and guide me in all of the different things. And so the value of just being able to offer a great first experience to new hires is definitely something that we're very proud of, that we can help. And I would say that the money you save with offering inconsistent experience is, yeah. I have this example in which a couple of I think it's a couple of weeks ago, a big franchise company settled down in my hometown. It's a pizza place. I will not name names, but it's one of the big ones. And so they opened up in the weekend, and I was hungry. I was like, hey, I want a pizza. I want to try them out. So I ordered, and after about an hour, still no pizza delivered, and it was like, okay, it's been a long time. I'm going to call. I'm going to ask.
Now I'm hangry, not just
Yeah,
hungry, but hangry.
exactly. Fortunately, it was not my wife because she's much hangrier than me.
Yeah.
But I called and I was like, okay, I understand you're busy, but what's up? Where's my pizza? And they were like, yeah, we're swarmed. We apologize, but hey, I can see on the boards that your pizza is next, so it's coming. An hour and a half later, still no pizza. So I was waiting 2 hours and a half. And so the point of this story is that even for such a big brand, not having a process for when you open a new store and you know that there's going to be a lot of people ordering, you should have a playbook on how to handle so much work, and just being open and upfront about the fact that, hey, Gary, I'm sorry, we're swamped. It could take another hour and a half, instead of lying and say, hey, you're next up. It's going to be there in about 15 minutes. Impacted my experience as a customer so much that I didn't really want it to order anymore after that specific experience, even though their pizza is fine. The customer experience, because they were not trained on how to handle that situation, is probably costing them revenue still today. So um, these are some of the benefits of having outlines how to do things and how to handle specific situations in your business. It's going to save you money, save you time, and help you in different ways.
Well, and I like the tangible and intangible. Sometimes we're even unaware of how much money something is costing us. One, because we're unaware, and two, because it's almost incalculable sometimes. So I've got an issue, and it's an excuse. I know already, but one of my excuses, I guess, that I need your help with in, and we have the Google Drive that's just covered in so much computer dust, it's probably not even funny. We're making strives and efforts every day to be able to improve that and have that be a more seamless experience for our employees first, because they matter and they're important. But one of my excuses is also things, especially as it relates, Gary, to technology, they're just advancing so quickly. I almost feel like every week or month there is a new platform, or we're making a switch from this phone system to that phone system, or hey, Slack's great, but this is better. Let's give it a. And so what advice do you have for me, and maybe others that are listening have a similar issue or opportunity, if you will, for a workplace that is, and especially one that's in hyper growth? I mean, the systems and processes in place to run a $500,000 firm or company break at $3 million and 30 employees, and break again at $10 million and 100 employees. And so what advice or what would you say to me or to someone that things are just changing
Yeah.
so much? And what does the maintenance look like in order to provide those updates and sorts of things?
That's a great question. It's definitely a challenge we saw in the beginning as well, in which you put a lot of effort in that initial documentation, and then after 6 months so much has changed and the documentation hasn't, and so all of that work has gone to waste, and you just don't muster the courage anymore to go back to those documents. And so I
It's
would
like
say
throwing away your favorite pair of jeans. You're like, I just can't do it, even though there's holes everywhere. It's such a good friend, such a good memory with those jeans, you know?
Exactly. And so there's a couple of things. First of all, I think that it never makes sense to document everything. I think you need to find a fine balance between what really moves and guides your team forward and what's just details. And so, looking at what we call the low hanging fruit, the things that really are going to have a big impact, is probably what you want to focus on first. You can always add details later when enough of those situations come up. Then you may want to document it, but don't go and document every little exception out there that you might face. So that's probably the first one. Don't go overboard with too much information. The second one, and that's something we build into Will, is um, set up a process for updating your process documents, because you do need a process. And so the way Will helps is by having the ability to specify who your subject matter experts are on specific topics. And what you can do is set review intervals, having the system remind you that, hey, this specific topic is something we review on a quarterly basis. It's something that we know changes a lot in our company or industry. Have Will follow up with your subject matter experts and tell them, hey, it's been 3 months since we last updated this. Is this still relevant? Is this still the right thing? Just the right way of doing things? And just having a process and having a system that follows up with your staff members is probably going to help you in maintaining everything that you want to have documented. But it's still it still takes some discipline. You do need a process in house on making sure that this is something ingrained into your culture. And so you need to have buy in from a lot of people on your team to make this work. But that's something we help with. We navigate you through getting this started and building out a culture where documentation matters.
So, final question as we kind of round this out in the next 2 or 3 minutes. I had lunch yesterday with brothers that own a pest control company here in town. The Romneys, really young, ambitious, hungry, really capable people, and they're growing their company and they're scaling. And there's a lot of people that are in their same situation. And they were asking a lot of questions as it relates to, at this size, what do you do? At this, at what point do you make this key hire and those sorts of things? What would you tell Gary, the entrepreneur or the director of operations or the operations manager that is working 50, 60 hours a week, 100 hours a week, whatever it might be, and are feeling the crushing weight of all that there is to do? I mean, what do you say to them about where they start? Where do they start? What's the first thing that they do? How do they get going when they might be just so overwhelmed? They don't have another minute in the day.
Yeah. And that's where it's ironic, because that's the objection we hear all the time. It's never about value, it's never about pricing. It's about, Gary, I get what you're saying, but I do not have the bandwidth for this. I'm already running out of time. And that's the irony, because putting time into this is going to save you so much time down the road. So there's a couple of ways in which I would advise our customers in getting this started. One, don't do it alone. Never see this as a one-man operation. Involve your team, get their buy-in, and distribute the loads between different people in your company, because it's not because you're the vice president of operations or the CEO that you know everything. there's still a lot of very capable people, hopefully in your company, that know how things run, but they still have it in their head. So involving them is definitely a good place to start. If you really don't have the bandwidth, you can find experts that help you with this. You have people that specialize in documentation services, and they come in, they have a methodology to get it out of your head, and they'll do the documenting for you. So you can outsource it and hit the ground running by having them do the heavy lifting. We try to help with templates as well, but again, it resides back to that low-hanging fruit. What is that 20% that's going to have 80% impact? And so it's taking it one step at a time. And a funny side effect happens when you start documenting. It's something I experienced myself, is as long as the process is in your head, you're looking at it in a very abstract way. And once it's written down, you're going to see it with a different pair of eyes, and you're going to look at this like you never had before, and you're going to find out things like, wait a minute, why are we doing this way? Now that I'm reading it, now that I can see it in front of me, I don't know why we haven't changed this. So there's so much benefit. It's just taking that first one step, and then everything will follow.
Gary, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your time that is very limited and very valuable with me and with everyone that's listening to this and will listen to this. Where can people find you if they need to connect, if they need to, engage in services with you? I know it's whale.io. Do they find you on LinkedIn? Do they get a consult? Where would you point them? How do people connect with you?
It's usewhale.io. I wish it was whale.io, but that was taken. So it's usewhale.io. They can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm spending a lot of time on LinkedIn these days. They can sign up for a free trial through the website, usewhale.io, and there is a 14 free trial. People can try the system out for themselves, or they can book a demo with one of our solution specialists that will show them all of the ins and outs, share case studies relevant to your industry. So I would probably say the website or connecting with me is the way to go.
Wonderful. Gary, thank you so much. Check Gary out, everybody, on LinkedIn, usewhale.io. Check them out there as well. Thank you so much for tuning in today, everybody, and create just a wonderful day. Until next time, bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Multiply You podcast. You'll see us again soon when you subscribe for future episodes.